Hey guys, tonight we open a book you were never supposed to find. It's wrapped in fabric, bound in leather darker than ink. No title, no author. Just the weight of something once whispered and then buried. You hold it gently, fingers trembling not from age but meaning. Because inside this book are ideas once powerful enough to be banned. Thoughts so bold rulers tried to erase them, and yet here it is, waiting. Before you open it, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where and when you're listening. Now dim the lights, maybe light a candle, and let's drift into a world where knowledge wasn't shared, it was hunted. It begins not in fire but in silence. Baghdad, 10th century, golden age of Islam. The House of Wisdom casts long shadows. Scholars gather, but not all ideas are welcome. You sit beside a young man clutching a scroll he copied in secret. On it, a forbidden treatise, a challenge to orthodoxy. A question that no one dares ask aloud. He doesn't speak. He listens, watches, waits. Because ideas in this place are not just shared, they're smuggled. Historians still debate what the lost texts contained. Some say astrology, some say theology, some say dangerous dreams of free will. But one thing is certain. In this age, words could be weapons, and books could be treason. You turn the first page, but the story begins with someone who no longer exists. His name isn't written in history books, but once he was whispered in every hallway of Baghdad. A scholar, a questioner, a man who knew what shouldn't be known. He wrote things no one dared say, copied texts from Greek, Hindu, Persian traditions, translated without permission, and asked, what if the stars don't control us? What if reason is divine? Then one day, he vanished. No trial, no fatwa, no funeral, only a gap in the lectures at the House of Wisdom. Only a shelf emptied overnight. You ask the librarian. He shrugs. You ask the students. They look away. You ask the guards. They say nothing but watch you too closely. Historians still argue whether he fled, was exiled, or executed. Some say he changed his name and lived quietly in Cairo. Others say his bones lie beneath the Tigris, weighed down by stone and silence. But here's the strange part. Weeks later, someone found a parchment tucked beneath a prayer mat. One line, scrawled in haste, faded but legible. They can kill the body, but not the thought. Quirky detail. Some believe he encoded his works using patterns from star charts, hiding meaning inside geometry. Others say he trained pigeons to carry micro-scrolls between cities, building the first underground knowledge network. Either way, the message is clear. Knowledge could not be unlearned, only chased deeper into the dark. It didn't start with violence. It started with smoke, a courtyard. At dawn, a pile of parchment stacked like firewood. Not political manifestos, not enemy propaganda, just books. Books about the stars, about medicine, about philosophy. You stand in the crowd, wrapped in silence. A muezzin calls in the distance, but no one moves. Then one man steps forward, a torch in his hand. He says nothing, and lights the fire. The flame doesn't roar, it whispers. The first pages curl inward. Ink runs like veins. 1,000 questions vanishing. People don't cheer, they watch. Some cross their arms. Others turn away. A few take mental snapshots of the titles before they're gone. Historians still argue who ordered the burning. Some say it was a vizier pressured by rival schools. Others say it was the caliph himself, urged by men who feared dissent more than war. Quirky detail. One student reportedly snuck in at night to copy pages by memory, recreating entire manuscripts, line by line from what he had once skimmed between lectures. Another buried scrolls in clay amphorae, disguising them as olive oil shipments to Basra. But the truth is simpler. This wasn't about the books. It was about what they allowed people to ask. And those questions, still smoldering, just waiting for air. The fire is gone. The books are ash. But something remains. Not a page, not a theory, a question. One that wasn't burned, because it was never written, only spoken once and remembered forever. It wasn't defiant, it wasn't loud. It was whispered by a young girl to her teacher. If the truth changes, was it ever true? No one answered, but someone heard, and told another, and another. Until the question crossed courtyard cities' borders not as rebellion, but as a riddle that refused to die. You hear it again in a back room in Damascus. You see it scratched into a wall in Cordoba. You catch it half erased in a margin beside a diagram of the stars. Historians still argue whether the question was real or invented later. Some say it was a parable. Others believe it originated in ancient India and resurfaced as an echo in the Islamic world. But the effect was undeniable. People began to ask more. What is truth? Who decides what's dangerous? Can knowledge be wrong if it makes us think? Quirky fact. In some schools, students created mirror pages, texts written backwards or disguised as poetry, so they could hide subversive logic inside verses of love. Others developed debate circles in silence, passing tokens to indicate turns instead of speaking aloud, so no word could be recorded against them. You pause. Not because you're afraid, but because you realize this story isn't about the book. It's about the minds that refused to close. You expect heroes to shout, to fight, to stand in the open, but sometimes the most defiant act is filing a book in the wrong place. In a dusty corner of the House of Wisdom, a man sorts scrolls. His robe is plain, his beard short, his eyes tired but not dull. He doesn't teach, he doesn't write, he simply remembers. You watch him slide one scroll behind another. The title reads, On the Movement of Celestial Spheres. A banned topic. He glances around, tucks it inside a mislabeled sleeve, herbal remedies. Done. Historians still debate whether any librarians actually defied orders. But in Cairo, a library was found centuries later with a secret wing reachable only through a rotating shelf. Inside, dozens of scrolls once thought lost, hidden in layers of false catalogs. Quirky detail. Some librarians used coded ink that only revealed under candlelight. Others wrote decoy texts on top of real ones, harmless recipes masking radical astronomy. You ask this man why he risks it. He looks at you then at the shelves. Because fire forgets, but paper remembers. You stay quiet. You realize it wasn't just the scholars. It was the quiet hands behind them, the keepers of silence that saved history. Because in every banned library, there is someone who refused to believe forgetting was safer than knowing. They burned the books. They silenced the thinkers. They sealed the shelves, but they forgot about the roads. You ride with a caravan under a silver sky. Camels sway in rhythm. Spices, silks, and ceramics surround you. And buried deep in a crate of turmeric is a scroll, wrapped in cloth, smelling of ink and cinnamon, labeled personal correspondence. Inside, radical philosophy in Greek translated into Arabic, annotated in Farsi, smuggled across empires. Historians still debate the scale of this underground movement. Some say it was sporadic merchants carrying scraps out of affection. Others believe it was organized a silent network of scholars, traders, and diplomats, preserving what rulers tried to erase. Quirky fact. In parts of Al-Andalus, scholars hosted reading feasts where scrolls were shared like delicacies, then hidden in clay jugs and stored behind walls. One scholar reportedly memorized entire treatises and passed them orally over wine and figs. Another used mathematical problems to encrypt forbidden texts, solvable only by those trained in both algebra and poetry. Because ideas once born are hard to bury. They cling to trade routes, slip into letters, ride on coins. And they don't need armies. Just travelers with questions. You glance at the scroll. The ink is faded. The message still sharp. Truth has no borders. Some people copy books. Some protect them. But once in a while, someone becomes one. In a small corner of Damascus, beneath a crumbling archway, sits a young man. No scrolls, no ink, no shelves, but in his mind a library. You sit beside him. He closes his eyes and recites. Chapter 3. On the Nature of the Soul. Line 17. The soul is not bound by matter, only observed through it. Word for word, accent, inflection, marginal notes. He has memorized over 300 scrolls, most of them banned, many of them gone. Still, he listens, once, sometimes twice. Then, they stay. Historians still wonder if he truly existed. Some say he was a legend, built by hopeful minds in dark times. Others say his name was hidden by those who feared he'd be hunted. Quirky detail. It's said he could recite backward. Others say he encoded memory into breathing patterns, inhaling on logic, exhaling on metaphor. And he didn't do it to show off. He did it because paper burned. But the mind could not be confiscated. You ask him if he's afraid. He smiles, tired, calm. I don't need to carry the scroll. It carries me. You leave with more than a quote. You leave with part of the library. And so will the next person. And the next. Because sometimes the safest place to keep truth is inside a person who refuses to forget. Power fears the unknown, but power also craves it. You enter a marble chamber deep inside the palace. Lanterns flicker. Guards wait outside. A robed figure sits alone, not with weapons, not with gold, but with a book, leather-bound, no title. The same kind burned in public last winter. He opens it slowly, not out of duty, but out of curiosity. You watch him read, lips moving, eyes darting. He is not a tyrant here. He is a student. Historians still argue which rulers read in secret. Some say it was the Abbasid Caliph Al-Qadir who condemned deviant logic by day, but kept banned manuscripts in his private study at night. Others whisper of Andalusian emirs who built underground vaults of banned knowledge accessible only to themselves and their most trusted viziers. Quirky detail. One ruler reportedly memorized refuted theology just so he could debate it silently with himself. Another hid scrolls inside falcon cages under the guise of trade permits. You wonder why, then you realize censorship doesn't always come from hatred. Sometimes it comes from fear. Fear that a single page could unravel control. And sometimes the most powerful man in the empire just wants to understand what he's told to destroy. The book closes. The ruler sighs. He hides it again beneath prayer beads and perfumed letters. And the world never knows. But you do, because even in silence, a secret reader is still a believer. It wasn't a whole book. Not a scroll, not even a chapter, just a single page, charred at the edges, crinkled. Faint ink crawling like veins across the yellowed surface, found years later wedged behind a crumbling stone in an abandoned madrasa. Someone somewhere tried to hide it, or maybe forgot it, but it remained, and on it. Not instructions, not equations, a quote, handwritten, unattributed. Let thought flow where blades cannot. No one knows who wrote it. Maybe a teacher, maybe a child. But those few words traveled farther than most armies. Copied, whispered, painted into the lining of cloaks. Translated into Greek, then Latin. Eventually etched into a stone column in Toledo, where it still sits. Historians still debate if the quote is real. Some say it's a modern forgery. Others argue the ink is too old to fake. But here's what matters. It existed, and it was found. Quirky detail. An artist once created a mosaic made entirely from burned parchment fragments centered around this line. Another scholar wore it embroidered into the inside of his robe and revealed it only in death. You hold the page. It crumbles slightly, but the words, they stay. Because ideas don't burn like paper. They burn like stars, bright, quiet, and visible long after the fire is gone. You set the page down. There's no more to read. And yet the story isn't over, because that book, it never needed pages. It lived in whispers, in memory, in smuggled ink and unspoken questions. You walk now through a city without shelves, but you see them in the pattern of a mosaic that hides a forbidden formula. In the lullaby a mother hums encoded with metaphors. In the silence between two scholars who share a glance and understand. Historians call it the forgotten knowledge. But they're wrong. It wasn't forgotten, it just changed form. Because truth, when chased underground, doesn't vanish. It learns how to breathe in smaller spaces. Quirky fact: in Uzbekistan, an ancient well was found. Inside, sealed in wax, a single verse. I was buried not to die, but to wait for someone who'd listen. And now you're that someone, not because you have the book, but because you heard the story. And like the others before you, you'll carry it. In thought, in wonder, in quiet defiance. The book that was never meant to be read was always meant to be remembered. The story fades, but the echo remains. You're lying still now, eyes closed, but your mind not empty. It's flickering with ink, turning with quiet pages that may not exist, but feel real. Somewhere across time, someone is whispering this same tale, to a child, to a student, to no one at all, just the air. And that's the beauty of it. The knowledge they tried to erase survived in spaces they didn't look behind walls, under sleeves, inside hearts. Not as fire, but as ember. So tonight, let the silence be full. Let your breath carry questions. Let your sleep be soft with stories not yet written. And if ever you find yourself afraid to know, remember, what burns on the outside often glows on the inside. Good night, and may the pages find you in your dreams.